Now to what I think is the highlight of the parliamentary week, Barnaby Joyce.
When people say they're from the country, get it right. Steers don't fight. We castrate them so they don't, right? Steers have their testicles removed and they sit happily in the paddock and eat grass, getting as fat as possible so I can jam them on a truck and get paid money. Bulls, woo, bulls fight, right? And, you know, you try and stay away from the bulls.
The MVP of the week, I've got to say, Barnaby Joyce, credit to Barnaby, he's a real crack up. But he was there talking about beef tariffs. But I actually think he's summed up the first week of Parliament right there. Like steers fighting in the neighbour's paddock and all going a bit mad cow already. I mean, it was impossible, absolutely impossible in question time today for Labor to cough up a clear answer on anything.
The Coalition is the proud architect of AUKUS, a landmark national security agreement that will make Australia safer, stronger and more secure. 261 days ago, the American people elected a new president. In that time, more than 30 world leaders have met with the US president. Why has the Australian Prime Minister failed to meet with the US president?
The US president was elected and took office in January. Since then, we have had 3 conversations.
Oh, 3 combos, no big deal, that's enough. Couple of chats on the phone, we're all good. In other words, he has no words. So good on Susan Lee, she pressed again.
The United States is our closest ally, and 261 days ago they elected a new president. Over that period, the Prime Minister has spent more time making excuses for unacceptable live firing exercises off Australia's coast than he has spent in person with the US President. Following the Prime Minister's recent overseas travels, has he had a conversation with the US President?
We'll continue to put the case, but we'll also, as I have to President Trump, but we will also do so in the full recognition that the America First policy and ideology, which has been promoted by the Trump administration, is clear. He regards, to quote President Trump, tariffs as the most beautiful word in the English language. We have a very different position and will continue to put it.
I don't even think he knows what he was on about. And look, for all that ramble, I'm going to summarise it for you very easily and very quickly. The answer is no. There's no planned meeting with Trump. Absolutely nothing at all has changed. And well done to Susan Lee for asking questions about AUKUS and China. Because while the Prime Minister has spent a week whining and dining with the Chinese, back home, the Chinese were snooping around trying to find out details about the AUKUS agreement. According to the Daily Telegraph, the Consul General of China in Sydney, Wang Yu, used a closed-doors meeting with the Newcastle City Lord Mayor to probe for information about where the nuclear submarines will be docked. The Consul General explained that China is concerned that Chinese interests in Australia will be affected by strategic defence decisions. For example, is Newcastle Port a potential base for AUKUS submarines? The Lord Mayor explained that we are a nuclear-free city, but we will not have the means to stop a decision of this nature taken by the state and or federal governments. China expects that Australia and Newcastle will have good relations with other countries and is also looking to build good relations, but would not like us to use our good relations with other countries to adversely affect China. That is the key word. There it is. For all of the Prime Minister's panda diplomacy, photos here next to the Great Wall, China remains our greatest strategic threat and now dangerously has the audacity to try and obtain sensitive information about the AUKUS agreement. Now, this is a regime which has conducted live fire drills off our coast, sent spy ships our way, engaged in military near misses, imposed punitive tariffs on Australian goods and refused an investigation into the origins of COVID. And now this diplomat says we shouldn't use relations with other countries to adversely affect China? Really? I mean, clearly, that is a thinly veiled swipe at the United States. And China would love nothing more than to drive a wedge between Australia and our closest ally. And it doesn't have to try that hard. Albo hasn't got a meeting with Trump, but has with China 4 times and has positioned himself as an apologist for Beijing. Even today, when asked in question time about Chinese circumnavigation and the live fire drills, Labor was again quick to defend.
Is the Prime Minister seriously suggesting, because Australia engages with allies in the South China Sea, that the Chinese Communist Party is free to conduct live fire exercises without warnings off the south coast of New South Wales?
I'd be amazed if the opposition is actually suggesting this, who are asserting that the task group that came around Australia and in the vicinity of Australia earlier in the year were anywhere else other than in international waters. That is where they were. Now, if the Shadow Minister is suggesting that that must not occur again, I want to understand what standard is being promoted by those over there which would apply to Royal Australian Navy vessels when they are in the South China Sea and the East China Sea.
I mean, that would be music to Beijing's ears. In fact, it was when the PM repeated the same line last week.
President Xi said that China engaged in exercises just as Australia engages in exercises. I said what I said at the time, which was that it was within international law.
Oh, that settles it, doesn't it? And if you want to see what real leadership looks like when it comes to dealing with communist dictatorship, have a listen to former Prime Minister Scott Morrison addressing a US congressional panel probing the Chinese Communist Party.
The CCP fundamentally has a problem with representative democracies, and there are some irreconcilable differences between an authoritarian regime in China, as much as an authoritarian regime in Russia or Iran, for that matter, and the activities of free and open states.
Now, you'll recall Australia was placed in the deep freeze by China after Scott Morrison called for a thorough investigation into coronavirus. And the former PM went on to tell the hearing that China changed tactics after his election loss and is now using inductive engagement laced with charm and flattery to try and manipulate Australia and isolate the United States.
You have to be clear-eyed about this and not pretend that there is somehow that this is going to be resolved through discussion. Discussion is fine, engagement is good, it's better than the alternative. But if we think that that is going to produce a change in the mindset in Beijing about what their objectives are, then we're frankly kidding ourselves.
And while Scott Morrison was speaking home truths, billionaire mining magnate Andrew Forrest wrote in The Australian, "China has not just been a partner to me personally, but to the company I founded, Fortescue, and to Australia as a whole. Yet for reasons that had little to do with facts and everything to do with politics, an Australian government chose to sow fear over fostering respect." Wow, what a hero. About as much of a hero as Xi Jinping. I mean, China has intimidated us militarily and punished our economy, and all Andrew Forrest cares about is lovey-dovey exercises, saying treat a friend like a partner and together you can achieve the extraordinary. How romantic. Now, of course, Twiggy has his agenda firmly set on shoring up his green steel deals with China, but Australia's relationship with China is not another business transaction, and Scott Morrison understands the dangers it poses. He was, after all, the founder of the AUKUS agreement, which China so desperately wants information on. So in summary, China is checking out AUKUS. Albo still hasn't got a meeting with Trump, but it's okay. He's the best friend Beijing has ever had.